effective use possible. Just a point, my name is Derek Jacobson. I'm Vice President of the e-commerce practice at Levimentum and one of the original founders and principals in the company. Just a quick background on Levimentum and who we are and why we're talking to you about Magento today. Levimentum is one of Magento's outstanding partners for 2011 and one of the largest, most successful Magento implementation service providers in North America. We are a company that focuses not just on e-commerce solutions, but also everything that deals with the sales and fulfillment model. So that includes customer relationship management and Sugar CRM, solutions, integration, design, branding, and other elements that allow us to help kind of speak and assist clients with the totality of what they're trying to do around their e-commerce initiative, not just the sales capture itself. So we'll go through today's session. We'll try to make sure we share some thought around how e-commerce influences the entire organization in the context of multiple storefronts as well. And at the end, we'll be happy to answer any questions on those topics as well that you may have. So to lay out an agenda, some of the key items we're going to go through today. One, we're going to talk just an overview about what we're seeing in the marketplace, about why merchants are considering and leveraging multiple storefronts for their e-commerce initiatives as opposed to just a single instance. We'll talk about, some of the key areas to plan for, and based off of past customer successes and best practices, what are things that you want to be aware of when you start down this path in order to be successful. We're going to look at some of the key areas that often cause the biggest amount of operational or admin overhead for groups and companies once they're established, and we'll talk about how Magento specifically addresses those and some of the differences between it and other platforms on the marketplace right now. And I'll give you some links to some additional reference materials that you can leverage in your research, and obviously ways to contact us if you'd like to learn more. So starting kind of from the business need or driver of these types of activities, I want to speak a little bit to some of the trends we're seeing and share with you what other merchants have done successfully that may influence or be part of your long-term roadmap planning on the e-commerce front. One of the things that we're seeing is that with the dramatic increase in competition for customers, for margin on sales, things along those lines, is that merchants are starting to look to set up additional storefronts so that they can create effectively multiple brands. And each brand gives them the potential to market and sell to different subsets or niches within the marketplace. So, for example, a consumer goods retailer that may have a really wide product line they offer in its entirety on their core site, create secondary or tertiary sites that focus on just specific types of categories. So if they were doing electronic sales, they might have a sub-site that is around audiovisual equipment that is targeted toward government or education industry. Or have another site that is around consumer electronics for things like media, home utilities, things along those lines. And the idea is by leveraging their wide base and be able to create alternative branding approaches and messaging, they have the ability to capture a wider range of customers than they might get just through one standard, more generic, broad approach. It also allows them to potentially to sell at different price points in different marketplaces, and the idea that they may position more fronts for specific territories. Think of a local instance that's branded and marketed for the California Bay Area, the New York metropolitan area, or for a specific niche of buyers who tend to focus on higher value, higher margin products. And it allows them to take the same catalog and products and position them differently without eroding the overall value and market share of their current brand. The other starting to see, and this is really an emerging trend, is the idea of co-branded or joint online marketplaces. We have multiple merchants who effectively are teaming together and put their wares online in almost like a local mall. Example, this is a company called Zaid & Rowe, and what it allows them to do is create demand for each other so that end customers can purchase from multiple merchants at once. So not only does it support the idea of distribution partnerships, affiliate referral programs, but we're also seeing a growing trend of customers who are actually teaming together to create one online merchant experience that benefits multiple merchants on the back end. And then finally, based off of the different types of storefronts and who they're marketing to, there's the ability to position other value-add services. such as professional services, design, graphics, other types of value adds with levels of customer service, response, or customer segmentation that they can position into each unique brand. And I kind of give the analogy of looking at, the Gap Corporation, where they have Gap, Old Navy, and Banana Republic, and you could position multiple levels of customer service, branding, exclusivity, if you will, based off the storefront and the customer group that you're trying to market to. So all these things are trends that we're seeing in the marketplace, and they're main drivers why people are contacting us about how they go about doing this and how they do it in a way that doesn't overwhelm the company with support needs. With that, that presents a lot of great opportunity, but there's the caveat of what do you need to know? What are the risks when you start down this path? How do you avoid from getting overwhelmed on the back end? Well, the first and foremost is weighing operational impacts. And when you look at traditionally what people have had to do, we have different technology bases to support multiple storefronts for different market spaces. The thing you find is that you end up with multiple stores, each has their own catalog, each has their own inventory, and there's the challenge of if you present the same product and same inventory in 3 sites and you sell some of it in one, how does that get reflected in the other so that you aren't oversold? And that's probably the simplest example. When you have new products being introduced or revisions to your product line, how do you apply them and make them widely available without having to repeat that entire process for every single storefront you set up? Traditionally, it's always been a linear effect where the effort of one just gets multiplied across each storefront, and that's one of the risks that have caused people hesitation. Second, because we're talking traditionally about separate storefronts, there's always been an increased or proportional effort that when you want to market or brand each storefront differently, changes you make to one may result in changes that are applied across the board. And again, the value you get from marketing exposure results in a linear increase in effort and overhead as well. And so that has been traditionally a drawback that has discouraged people from looking at those types of activities. And customer service and support. When you have multiple e-commerce sites that are separate, they're separate releases, if you will, your service has to be manning the phones, manning the ticket queues, manning the email boxes for each site independently. And it becomes a logistical challenge and a training nightmare, especially if you're leveraging multiple technologies for each storefront. So those are some of the key drivers we've seen that have been hindrances for people being successful in this space. And what ties back to is that traditionally, the setup, brand, configure each storefront takes as long for each storefront as it did the original one, and the cost of support, service, and maintenance grows directly with each storefront you want. So there's no economy of scale that the existing or traditional technologies have provided over time. So when we look at that, just to break that down and summarize it, the biggest things that impact operational scale when it comes to multiple storefronts really focus on 4 main items. And there's always some things around the periphery that can be managed, but the 4 things that impact it most significantly are catalog management, so the setup, inventory, pricing controls, adjustments to inventory, the interface, how you brand each site, how you apply content, how you maintain that, managing the order intake and how effectively orders from multiple different technologies get into one fulfillment process so that your pick-pack processes are consolidated and consistent as possible. Customer service, that is where you have just a pure human element that the more tools you have to support and use, the less efficient they are and the more your sustaining costs grow over time. So when we look at each one of these by itself, right, we have identified several areas where Magento has a very specific approach that addresses those challenges and separates it from many of the tools on the marketplace to allow you to do this more effectively. And for all these auspices of all things, what we're talking about is effectively a single Magento enterprise instance that is supporting multiple storefronts on one deployment of Magento. And so you start to generate economies of scales around it, and we'll talk about how that happens. So specifically around our challenge with the catalog structure, we talk about what some of the things are that drive complexity here. Maintaining the addition of products, keep inventory up to date over time, making things like images, artwork, new attributes that you want to use for improved search results, SEO, all of those things that you had to repeat on every single storefront every time you want to make a change. Well, Magento's solution to that is something we call the virtual catalog model, where you can define one base catalog, which is the totality of your categories, your products with their attributes and their inventory, and we establish each separate storefront have the ability to inherit from that base. And basically say if I had 100 products, set up my second storefront, I can find that I want these 20 to be storefront number 2. Or I want all 100, but when I have storefront number 2, I'm going to provide alternate list pricing. But everything around inventory, the descriptions, SEO tags, metadata, all those things can be inherited from site to site. And more importantly, when changes to that inventory information in the first site, it replicates across all of them automatically. So I no longer have to deal with the scenario that selling product from one site has to somehow be manually reconciled throughout all the others. It really takes all of those processes that could either be manual or very complex integration, and it simplifies that into something that lets you focus more on managing your channel, managing your sales, as opposed to managing data. We have the ability, like I said, to do overrides site by site. So while you may start with a base set of information on your secondary sites that are predefined, you have the ability to override the aspects for each storefront that you want. So if you wanted to change the product language, description, and nomenclature, you have the ability to provide an alternate messaging for one storefront to speak to a specific marketplace that is different than what you do on the base. These things are important, and again, it's all about reducing the amount of human cycles and the amount of IT overhead that you have to invest in to make it successful. It's about driving a higher level of return on investment with each storefront that you might provision over time. Now look at this, how it plays out, just to give a real simplistic example, and this is something we're more than happy to speak to people online and go through in greater detail if anyone has interest. But if we take the idea of a simple pharmacy solution that has multiple storefronts to speak to different audiences, what we're looking at is there are two images overlaid here. The left, which is the pharmacy, if you see in the top left corner with a red arrow, it defines a specific product with its own retail price, a sale price or discount price, if you will. Next to it is an alternate layout for that same product for a different storefront, Hannaford, and that the price, sale price, those things can be changed from one to the other. They don't have to be kept in sync. So have the example we have here that it's initialized, it's predetermined to when you first set it up to inherit from the primary site, but you can override and modify those things where you feel appropriate from storefront to storefront to storefront. And it's not limited to price. Any product data that we're talking about has the same level of flexibility, but also has the same level of automation available to it. And this is an area that I think most people immediately gravitate towards because it's the part that is most visual. It is the part that everyone has an appreciation from because you interact with it generally every day. And that's the user interface and design. One thing that separates Magento from many solutions is the idea that your theme, your user interface, can be templatized. And you can have a starting framework that describes the structure, the checkout steps, how a product detail page is organized and structured. But you can take that a template, reapply it to each storefront, and customize them or modify them independently without affecting any of the others. So I can actually create a primary site which has a look and feel, color palette, logos, branding, etc. I take the same structure, apply it to my second site, and actively change elements of that skin that I feel are necessary. So changing the logos, changing the color fonts, hiding or adding options or categories or navigation elements that may be specific to each storefront. It takes the entire cycle of design and release and it shrinks it down to a much more finite set of tasks. So something that might have taken multiple weeks or even months, depending on the site, can literally in a matter of hours or days. Depends on how many changes you want to make. But literally, you can take a template, apply, change color logos, and within a day or two, you can have a completely rebranded site ready to go. The other of this that's really important is start talking about the idea of how content gets applied. So really, the ability to create static pages, or what we call CMS pages, that are sorted from site to site for things that are potentially like contact us or a privacy policy, which you may want to keep consistent, but you also have the ability to create content pages that are specific to a given site, so specific to a brand. You may change the shipping policy, for example, from one of your high-end sites to versus your stock commodity site. You have also the ability to implement what we call as role security. So literally, you define the idea of customer groups or tiers, especially in B2B categories. And for customers who are a member of a specific tier within a specific site, you could actually grant them to additional content and services that the general public wouldn't even see. And so the idea of taking these tools, which can generally administer through an admin console, through a wizard-like editor without any programmatic changes, it allows you to start adding additional value content and services to different groups of customers. And that is one of the key things that allows Magento to allows you to generate scale and leverage from. Perfect example, right? There are two sites that are in production, they're running, and it's a great example of how the technology enables a very specific approach. In the top left corner, we have vetpharmacy.com, which is one of 11 Vet certified, which is actually a regulatory certification for veterinary pharmacies. And notice just below to the right, there's a brand on pharmacy for pharmaceutical products. They're all leveraged a common infrastructure with a redefined brand, with a modified catalog for stuff that is specific for Kmart, but leverage a single inventory, single product replenishment process. They feed into the same order fulfillment model, and it's a perfect example of how you can create leverage for multiple brands, multiple storefronts, multiple workflows and processes off one Magento instance. The other thing that often causes a lot of challenge for organizations, when orders start coming in from the e-commerce sites and they hit the warehouse or they hit the fulfillment floor. When you have 2, 3, 4 different tool sets, if they're different, I'll use the case of Evolution, for example. You may have 2 or 3 sites, but they're totally separate instances. And if you want to take order activity and feed orders from your e-commerce site into your ERP solution, and then feed order shipping status updates or changes to order schedules to the e-commerce site for online visibility, you're replicating that integration structure between each and every site. You lose the idea of reuse and flexibility. One of the things that Magento does by leveraging this virtual catalog model, you can have orders coming in from multiple storefronts, which are into your ERP or order management fulfillment tool, and one integration point. And the integration point is what maps the order from one storefront to the warehouse to a set of pick lists. And then when shipping status comes back, that shipping status gets routed to the correct order in the correct storefront. It allows you to have one set of integration logic versus 2, 3, 4, 5, which means as you want to add and expand that level of integration over time, you're only doing it one time in one place, as opposed to having to replicate that for each and every storefront as well. That becomes an enormous time saver and capital expense saver after you've deployed your e-commerce solution. It's one of the biggest long-term drivers of scale out there. And then finally, the big area is around process standardization and control. And this really gets into the idea of customer service, how you manage some marketing activity that could come through multiple channels. So you may have an e-commerce presence, and you may have a brick and mortar. You may have an inside sales call center. You may have field sales people. Start to consolidate all those activities against one common base so that all channels see the same information. They all see the same inventory. Orders are all processed against the same account records. If you sell B2B and B2C, How do you make sure all activities are funneling back to the same customer account IDs on the order and finance side? This is an area where Magento makes significant inroads in helping companies grow. The idea is that by having multiple tools in place through the traditional approach, you have multiple training requirements for your customer service or sales group. You have multiple cycles of system maintenance, whether it's upgrades, network expansion, server patches, anything, right? You want to add new functionality, now adding it to your e-commerce solution, to your CRM solution, to your sales entry order on the ERP side. You're having to replicate the effort between multiple technologies, multiple paths, and it just becomes incredibly efficient and costly over time. By default, by having one application base that can service multiple lines within the company or multiple groups and roles, you can drive the same level of behavior. You effectively train people on one set of processes. You have a place to apply your updates. Everyone has access to the same thing at the same time, right? So you no longer have these situations where my manual order entry screen doesn't know how to apply certain promotional codes or discounts, but the e-commerce site does. So now if someone were to call in, I can't offer them the same promotions that they might get online because I don't have the means to capture it. Magento allows you to consolidate all of those activities under one roof, and you have a more flexible organization, not just on the e-commerce side, but on customer service, inside sales, field sales, etc. From the true support side, Magento is going to allow you to effectively capture customer inputs through email, through ticket requests, customers who call in traditionally. They're going to be able to go see the customer history and be able to service those phone requests. When you tie in other feeds or elements like social media or chat, those all drive back to Magento as well. And the customer service group has a greater ability to provide resolution faster with less talk time, which means they can service more customers, which is a driver of cost and profitability over time. Finally, just the simple idea that because you can consolidate these activities, you can leverage the tools that Magento provides around notification and communication so that you can be proactively notifying customers about what's happening with order activity, and therefore you're taking less calls, right? The idea of an online portal where someone can go look and see what's happening. So you're proactively communicating outbound to the customer, which reduces the number of call, email, and other type of service requests you have to support over time. So look at some of these things. And these are just a small volume of what Magento provides on the customer service front. Take some of the things that are most commonly interacted with. I need to make a return. Magento provides an RMA console that you can configure inside, enable or disable, but it allows the customer to initiate that return request from the web and put it to a workflow where your customer service group can process it, approve it, and provide return shipping labels or documentation to the customer all through Magento, right? That reduces call time, reduces cycle time to get tickets closed, and drives customer retention as a result. Now, what to expect if you've established your primary storefront and you want to start going down this front? What normally take? And I'll kind of talk to the low end and the high end. We don't want everything to just be best case on all scenarios. But I really say that we have seen instances of customers who have been able to basically ramp up and launch secondary or tertiary storefronts in as little as a week, basically, or 7 calendar days, following the release of the primary site. And the big driver of that is how much of your base are you going to reuse. You're going to largely reuse the same catalog and just apply some branding changes. You have something up and going in days. If we're going to make substantial changes to your catalog, you may have some additional time, but the key is Magento is about reuse and not a one-for-one effort. If you spent months building your primary site, the time for a secondary site should be a fraction of that. And it should be a small fraction unless you're doing something that is truly unique and functionally different on the secondary site. You also have a greater set of tools to be sufficient, and so the IT impact for each of these sites is going to be less. So just as you spend, let's say, 5 hours a month doing IT support to include new features and functionality, the addition of a secondary site isn't going to double that. The inheritance and reuse allows you to get more bang for that IT investment for your ongoing functional development. The key to make this all work is really about designing your primary site with the expectation of reuse. And that gets down to how you model your product catalog, how you set up your customer records, that there are some things on your primary site you use, but you may put things in place with the expectation that they're going to be used on a secondary site over time. Define those things up front so that your data capture processes provide data, give you more flexibility over time. So it's more a planning activity than it is even an implementation activity. And then to that point, LevelMentum is here to help. What's our prime goals is not just the creation of a brand or a look and feel. It help organize the business change process so that these things, from everything from attracting customers through SEO, through turning orders through a strong usable interface, to processing those orders and getting them into your ERP system on the back end. We are here to help with the entirety of that life cycle. So a couple keynotes to wrap up the discussion before we open it up to question and answers from the group. I've listed a number of resources on our site, and we'll be offering additional ones in the coming weeks that are around this topic. We will be putting together a recorded demo that's specifically around working example of what it takes to set up some of the backend information for a second storefront, how it looks on the front end. That will be up, and we'll be contacting everyone to give them access to this once in place. And obviously, anyone who wants to is welcome to reach out to us, and we're happy to talk to people one-on-one if you have questions about any one of these elements in more specific details. So why don't we go ahead and turn it back to you, or have you go ahead and let's any questions, be happy to answer them at this time.
Are there any questions for anybody? The only question I've received so far is asking if there's going to be a copy of the PowerPoint slideshow available after the webinar. And yes, this entire webinar will be available on our website. Any questions? That's it then, unless there's something else you wanted to share.
I thank everybody for your time. Hopefully you found a good use of your half hour. As Holly said, we will make sure the slides are available. We will also have a recording of this webinar online for you to access at any time, and we will be sending those details out to you following this webinar later on today or tomorrow.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.